Welcome back to our channel. The tension hung thick in the air, an invisible weight pressing down on every corner of the Dupree estate, reverberating through the halls where whispers and glances carried more power than words. Andre's mind was a storm of conflicting impulses. He wanted to reconcile, to mend the fractures with Danny that had become impossibly wide, yet the presence of Anita and Vernon waiting, their eyes sharp with unresolved suspicion, stirred a volatile anger within him. Each step toward them felt like stepping onto a battlefield where old grievances and unspoken accusations could ignite at any moment. Every decision he had made in the last few weeks loomed over him like a shadow, threatening to expose his missteps, his betrayals, and the compromises he had forced himself to accept in order to survive within the family's complicated web of power and expectation. Danny, meanwhile, moved through the preparations for her grand photo shoot at Forrester Creations with a precision that belied the chaos inside her. Her hands orchestrated the camera setups, the lighting angles, and the wardrobe changes, yet her mind replayed every conversation, every betrayal, every subtle insult from the people around her. The pressure to perform perfectly collided with the pressure to maintain her image, to uphold a facade of control even as the foundations beneath her seemed to crumble. She could feel the invisible fingers of scrutiny, questioning her every action, and the betrayal of trust from those closest to her gnawed at the edges of her composure, threatening to unravel her at any moment. Elsewhere, Ted and Leslie navigated the fallout from the bitter clash between Kat and Eva. The confrontation had left scars, subtle but deep, that manifested in the most unexpected ways. Each attempt at reconciliation only seemed to intensify the resentment, creating a ripple effect that reached far beyond the immediate circle. Ted wrestled with frustration and helplessness. He knew that any misstep could escalate the tension, driving irreparable wedges between the people he cared about. Leslie, equally burdened, felt the strain of responsibility pressing down, the guilt of inaction mingling with the fear of causing further harm. Every small decision became a potential catalyst for disaster, every interaction a powder keg of emotional energy that could explode without warning. Shanice's loyalty to Derek was both a refuge and a prison. Her presence by his side, steadfast and unwavering, masked a tempest of self-doubt and resentment. She knew that her devotion was being exploited, that her identity had become subordinate to the needs and desires of another. Yet leaving him was impossible, a betrayal of her own emotional investment and the fragile threads of hope she clung to. In the quiet moments, when the world outside seemed to pause, she questioned herself relentlessly: was she loved, or merely used as a balm for his shortcomings? Each answer she imagined brought waves of anger, despair, and a suffocating sense of helplessness. The tension between her heart and her instincts created cracks in her resolve, tiny fissures that threatened to widen under the relentless pressure of expectation and deceit. Anita and Vernon, for their part, maneuvered with an intensity that blurred the line between concern and confrontation. Their determination to reach Andre was fueled by a mix of righteousness and frustration, a desire to claim control over circumstances that seemed increasingly unmanageable. Every step they took, every look they exchanged, communicated an unspoken challenge, a silent accusation that demanded a response. Their presence acted as a magnifying glass on Andre's doubts and insecurities, amplifying the tension until every decision became not just a matter of choice but a test of endurance and moral fortitude. The room itself seemed to pulse with the weight of unspoken truths, the potential for explosive confrontation lurking in every shadow, in every pause between heartbeats. As the day progressed, the intersecting tensions of all parties created a volatile environment where personal agendas collided. Danny's meticulous control over her professional presentation could not shield her from the emotional chaos surrounding her. Andre's attempts at reconciliation were constantly undermined by the silent judgment and expectations of those around him. Ted and Leslie's careful interventions teetered on the edge of futility, unable to stem the tide of resentment spreading like wildfire. Shanice's struggle for self-respect and recognition unfolded in a series of quiet, almost imperceptible gestures that revealed the depth of her internal conflict. Every character faced decisions with consequences they could neither predict nor control, forcing them into a crucible of tension where each reaction carried the weight of potential catastrophe. Small betrayals and subtle manipulations compounded the pressure. Danny noticed a glance exchanged between Anita and Vernon that suggested a hidden strategy, a plan to provoke or unsettle Andre. Ted caught a fleeting expression on Kat's face that hinted at ulterior motives, stirring doubts that had no clear resolution. Derek's subtle shifts in behavior kept Shanice on edge, making her question every loyalty and every intention she had once held as certain. The house itself seemed to amplify these tensions, the grand architecture and echoing corridors serving as a constant reminder that nothing remained hidden, that every secret, every suppressed emotion, would eventually rise to the surface. By the time the evening descended, the emotional landscape of the Dupree estate was a map of frayed nerves, smoldering resentments, and fragile alliances. Each character was trapped in a corner of their own making, forced to confront the stark realities of their desires, their betrayals, and their fears. The interplay of ambition, loyalty, and vengeance had reached a crescendo where the only certainty was uncertainty. Every decision became a potential rupture, every glance a possible trigger, every heartbeat a countdown to revelation or collapse. In this charged atmosphere, it was impossible to predict who would emerge unscathed and who would be consumed by the very forces they had struggled to control. As night settled over the Dupree estate, a suffocating silence seemed to fall across the sprawling rooms, but the quiet was merely a veneer, hiding the turbulence that churned within each of its inhabitants. Andre sat in the dim light of his study, the weight of choices he had yet to make pressing upon his shoulders. Every memory of past errors, every whisper of doubt that had crept into his mind since morning, now crystallized into a relentless storm. He understood, with brutal clarity, that any attempt at reconciliation could backfire, that even the smallest misstep could ignite the simmering tension surrounding him. Anita and Vernon's scrutiny had left him raw, vulnerable, and yet defiant, caught between a desperate need to protect his dignity and the gnawing guilt that he had failed those he cared about. The complexity of loyalty and betrayal intertwined so tightly that escape seemed impossible. He could feel the walls closing in, each decision a knife's edge that might either sever or sustain the fragile threads of family and trust. Meanwhile, Danny's evening had unfolded into a maelstrom of emotional strain. The grand photo shoot, initially a symbol of control and professional prowess, became a crucible where her insecurities and frustrations were magnified. Each pose, each carefully calculated angle, served as a reminder that perfection was an illusion, that her public triumphs could not shield her from the private chaos encroaching on every side. Thoughts of Andre's uncertain loyalty, of the silent manipulations by those she had once considered allies, gnawed at her focus. She sensed, in every shadowed corner and in every lingering glance, that the line between ally and adversary had blurred beyond recognition. The pressure of expectation, combined with the relentless scrutiny of the powerful figures surrounding her, threatened to erode her resolve. The mask of composure she had worn so carefully throughout the day began to crack, revealing the storm of doubt, fear, and simmering rage beneath. In another wing of the estate, Ted and Leslie grappled with the consequences of the Kat-Eva conflict, each revelation feeding a sense of helplessness that gnawed at their resolve. What began as small misunderstandings had metastasized into a network of grievances and hidden motives, leaving them to navigate a labyrinth of distrust. Every corrective action seemed only to deepen the entanglement, every attempt at clarity a reminder of how fragile their control truly was. The air between them felt electric with the unspoken knowledge that a single misstep could shatter the delicate balance of relationships they had tried so painstakingly to preserve. Shanice, unwavering in her proximity to Derek, felt a different sort of prison. Her loyalty, once a source of pride, had become a crucible of internal conflict. She questioned whether her devotion was empowering or merely a surrender to the control and desires of another. With each subtle manipulation she perceived, each carefully disguised slight, her self-esteem wavered, threatening to tip into anger and resentment. She understood, with painful clarity, that her love could not protect her from the consequences of Derek's choices, and yet she could not summon the courage to break free from the emotional chains that bound her. By the time the clock crept toward midnight, the Dupree estate had become a microcosm of human frailty and ambition, each character trapped in a web of their own making. Loyalties strained to breaking points, secrets poised to surface, and the relentless pressure of expectation converged into a single, almost tangible force, pressing each individual to the edge. In this crucible of ambition, guilt, and betrayal, the characters were forced to confront the duality of their nature. The simultaneous desire for connection and fear of exposure, the longing for forgiveness and the impulse toward retaliation. Every glance, every hesitation, every choice had consequences that rippled outward, entangling friend and foe alike. As the first rays of dawn began to filter through the grand windows, the storm inside the Dupree estate had not abated, it had only shifted, simmering beneath the surface, ready to erupt anew. Each character faced the unrelenting truth that actions, once taken, could not be undone, and that the price of survival in such a complex network of ambition and emotion was never certainty, only endurance. The night had left them raw, exposed, and reckoning with the realization that the world they had constructed around them, of power, influence, and carefully guarded alliances, was far more fragile than they had ever imagined. And as they each retreated to their separate rooms, the weight of impending decisions, the specter of betrayal, and the unyielding demands of desire and loyalty promised that the struggles of the day were far from over. The quiet of the estate was only a temporary veil over the storm that would inevitably return with renewed intensity, leaving every character poised at the precipice of irreversible choices, consumed by the internal battles that no reconciliation or ambition could ever fully quell.